What happened to your sister at the incident?
She was killed at Chuck E. Cheese. This was disgruntled ex-employee, been fired, and he came in at around closing time and waited in the restroom until he heard the vacuums going on. Knew that was his way of knowing that all the customers had left. And he came in with a gun and ended up to rob the place. He was mad that he'd been fired, and he shot 5 people and killed 4 people.
I am Drew, aka Dadpool, and today we are here in the Honey House Entertainment Studio, interviewing a burn and trauma survivor. She's gone through things that no one could ever imagine, but she is here to tell her story right now. Life in Many Colors welcomes April Crowell.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. Glad to have you here as well. So I want to get into the nitty-gritty of things that we know about you. I happen to know you for a long time, but I want everybody out there that doesn't know you to feel something with you and a connection with you like I have. The first thing I wanted to ask you was, April, before we get into everything that you survived through your accident, who were you before this? What was life like growing up for you?
Oh, wow. Life growing up, I grew up in Aurora. I was the smart kid in the family. I loved school. On a roll in high school, but, not much as far as extracurricular activities or anything. I was pretty involved with church and just really enjoyed, spending time with friends and family, and pretty non-eventful childhood growing up. I've got several siblings, got 3 brothers and 2 sisters, and my mom and dad, who have unfortunately since passed away, but they were great parents. So, nothing really to speak of. My dad was an airline pilot, and so we got to do quite a bit of traveling all over the place, which was, I feel very fortunate to be able to have done all of that. And I was a little bit irritated when I had to start buying airplane tickets. So, yeah.
Definitely a core memory that you built with you there doing that. That's awesome. I do want to ask you, before you look back at your life, before January 2021, did you already feel like you had been through a lot?
Yeah. I'd been through a pretty significant trauma. When I was 17, my sister was taken from us in a robbery gone bad situation. She was a couple years older than me, and so that's had a very big impact on my life, and really kind of changed directions for our whole family in a lot of ways. We, I still did continue on with my schooling, but it really shifted my focus, and that happened when I was a senior in high school. And so, for example, I don't even really remember my last semester of high school. I somehow passed all my classes, and was still able to, graduate with on the honor roll and everything. But that was like, living through a dream, going through that experience. So, yeah.
What happened to your sister at the incident?
She and I'm watching the words here for the YouTube censors. She was killed at Chuck E. Cheese in 1993. I don't know.
Take us through that. Like, is it something that is it a papers or like what happened?
Oh yeah. I don't know how long you've been in Colorado, but yeah.
Not
as long as 93.
Yeah. This was a disgruntled ex-employee, been fired, and he came in at around closing time and waited in the restroom until he heard the vacuums going on. Knew that was his way of knowing that all the customers had left. And he came in with a gun and ended up to rob the place. He was mad that he'd been fired, and he shot 5 people and killed 4 people. So, yeah, this was before all the mass shootings were just commonplace everywhere. It kind of rocked Colorado, especially the city of Aurora where it happened. It was like everybody just was aghast about this. This was before Columbine. This was before really any of that stuff happened. So yeah, that's what happened to her. She just went to work one night and then that was the last. Yeah.
Sorry to hear that. I'm gonna pull that story up.
Yeah.
Kind of attach it with that, so we actually.
You can. There's a lot of not documentaries but shows about it.
Yeah.
Kendra and I just watched one 3 weeks ago. Where
Did you?
I mentioned it, and I mentioned to Kendra that your sister was involved with that, and she's like, "Well, I know. I heard about her dying. I didn't know it was that." I was like, "Yeah,
yeah." That was that. So that took us just. It just was years and years and years going through all the courts and preliminary hearings and the trial and the change of venue. They ended up moving that trial down to Colorado Springs just because they.
Did he survive?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Is
he still locked up?
Yeah, he was on death row. He got convicted of, he got sentenced to death, and then the governors in 2013, Governor Hickenlooper stepped in and kind of put a pause on that for everybody that was on death row, not just for him, but for everybody. And then, so that put us, that was after all the appeals had been exhausted. He went through the Colorado Supreme Court all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they declined to hear his case. And so at that point, it had been 20 years later, after all of that was done, it's like, okay, it's finally going to be over. And then it didn't happen. And then I think in 2020, maybe, the next governor pulled, basically commuted all of those death sentences into life without parole. So that at that point, that was another shock. But, after some processing, I was like, well, it's not the outcome we had hoped for. It's not the outcome that the jury wanted, but at least it's over. And now there's some more development of that's just happening. Like I just got notified of it last week, that he's trying to get into some kind of reintegration program, like to reintegrate into society. And I don't know what will come of that. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say too much on that one, because I don't know. I still need to talk to the prosecutor's office and get some more information on that. But sounds to me like they're trying to create parole out of thin air with this one. So it's another knock. But I don't know what will come of that one.
And he shot 5 people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we do something, a little documentary on it, we can sway that from that happening.
Well, especially with the background that Aurora's had between the 1993 Chuck E. Cheese, the 2012
the theater
shooting, I'm sure that brought up those feelings too. And
yeah,
because there's definitely not a place in humanity for people like this to show any kind of humanity
Right.
to them. So,
Yeah.
how would you say that loss shaped you and your family?
It was so unexpected and so out of the blue. Just hard to describe what that did to us. We would not talk about it a whole lot. We would, have our moments of talking about it, but it just um, shook everything that we knew about what was supposed to be right with the world and how life was supposed to go for you, and that obviously didn't happen. And then there were a lot of over the years, a lot of hearings and trials and appeals and everything like that. And so that was a lot of years of just kind of working through the system and not not really knowing what's going to come next as far as the legal system, the legal case. So yeah, that took a lot of mental energy out of all of us. I mentioned, myself, I was able to go ahead and graduate from high school. My younger brother, for example, though, it happened when he was a freshman. And so that really kind of upended a lot of his schooling. And, I think now we're all doing relatively well. It's a bond that we all have that is hard to describe. I'm real close with my siblings, and I think a lot of that comes from that trauma experience that we all went through.
So, you were 17 when this happened.
Mhm.
You obviously were at a young age. What did it teach you about grief at this age and about how quickly life can change before you experienced your accident?
Oh, life can turn on a dime. It really can. It's you're going down one path, and with the expectation that this is what life is going to look like. This is what my plans are. This is the next step and what's going to happen. And then something like that happens, and it just, you know, puts a halt to everything. My sister was my best friend. We were real close growing up, and, um, we ended up losing not just her, but over the course of time, lost contact with a lot of her friends and things like that. Um, I think about every once in a while, like, oh, I wonder what this person is up to. I wonder whatever happened to this person. And um, so, yeah, it really kind of shakes the foundation of what you think is going to happen with your life.
I want to ask you and take us back to January of 2021. Can you tell us about what happened the day of your accident, starting from the beginning? What went wrong?
Yeah. Well, that was in the middle of the COVID pandemic. And at the time, there were a lot of, you couldn't find a lot of certain products on the shelves at the grocery store. Couldn't find toilet paper, paper towels, or anything with bleach. And so, and the pandemic had been going on for a while. And my boyfriend at the time was impacted by layoffs at work. He worked in the hospitality industry. And so he had been staying with me for a few weeks prior to that. And so when we were just, hanging out, and I was cleaning, doing some cleaning. And since you couldn't find bleach products anywhere, I was cleaning with some rubbing alcohol. and was just, wiping down some tables and cabinets and surfaces and things like that to try to sanitize things. And I ended up spilling some of the rubbing alcohol on my pants. Didn't really think anything of it. It's, you use rubbing alcohol all the time, and there's no, it's safe and a good disinfectant. Well, several minutes later, after I got finished with some cleaning, I went to light a candle or some incense. I don't remember which. And the fumes were still in the air. I couldn't even smell them. And it caught my pants on fire. So I don't really remember a whole lot of that night, other than just kind of some of the specifics of, what I was doing and then what happened next. So, I don't even really remember the fire starting. My boyfriend he was in the other room, and he heard me scream and came and got me into the shower. Got some cool water running over me in the shower, and, was able to get my clothes off of me, and then called 911. And I just remember looking over at my leg and seeing it was already turning pretty, pretty dark pink, pretty red. And I just remember thinking, oh boy, this is not going to be very good. So don't really remember much. Then I woke up, I think, once in the ambulance. They tried to take me over to Denver Health Hospital, but the burns were too severe, so they ended up taking me over to UC Health. And I can only assume that they had put me on some pretty strong painkillers when I was in the ambulance, because I was pretty knocked out. I really don't have a lot of memories of what happened, or the ambulance ride. Just kind of vaguely look up, see a couple of the paramedics, and then I was back out. So yeah, the next thing I kind of remember was waking up in the burn unit there at UC Health. I think there was a nurse and a couple of social workers there, kind of to orient me. And one of the ladies said something. She said, "Well, you've been in a bad burn accident. You're at University of Colorado Hospital in the burn unit, and there's no smoking, no drinking, and no drugs." And I said, "Well, I guess I quit smoking." So I did. I haven't smoked any cigarettes since then. So yeah, that was, kind of very disorienting. They told me that I would be there for probably at least a couple of months. It didn't end up being that long, but the first thing that kind of went to my mind was my job. And, it's just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen at work? And how am I going to, how's my work going to get done and all of that stuff.
So I know that the accidents tend to play with your memories and your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what it felt like to be on fire?
I really don't. No, I think it was kind of a flash burst kind of thing. I don't even really remember screaming. My boyfriend heard that, and like I said, he had no idea what had happened. So he got me into the bathtub and called 911. And but yeah, it happened so fast. And
do you think your boyfriend's reaction to what happened saved your life?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, there was a little bit of burn damage on some of the furniture, like the chair that I was close to. And I don't know what would have happened had I been alone when that happened. Yeah, he saved my life. I'm convinced of that. I don't know that I would have been able to, say, and I've gone over this a few times, mentally, like what would have happened if he hadn't been there. I don't know if I would have been able to get into the shower. I don't know if, had that very small fire started, I don't know if I would have been able to put it out. And I think, well, say I was able to even just make it in the shower to extinguish myself or anything like that. I don't even know that I would have been able to get to my phone to call anybody. So yeah, he saved me.
So when the accident happened and you had woke up in the burn unit and you realized how bad it was, what were the first thoughts that went through your head when something like this happened?
Trying to piece together how did I get here? It was surreal waking up in that situation. Anyway, I looked down and, I'm covered with bandages and, at that point, not feeling too much in pain. And so I didn't realize how bad it was, I don't think, until I was in the burn unit for a little bit. Even though they, while they were trying to kind of orient me to the situation, they're like, you're going to be here for probably at least a couple of months. And that it just didn't click, it's like, what do you mean a couple of months? I didn't understand what had happened really. And how serious it was.
What percentage did you end up with?
Yeah, I was burned about 30%. I've got this little spot here on my arm, which when I'm wearing clothes, that is the only spot that's visible. So I'm dealing with hidden scars for the most part. I've got a spot on my belly and almost entirely like the back of my legs are burned.
How many grafts did you end up with?
I ended up with 3 different skin graft surgeries. So, some on, I think they did my left leg and then my right leg. And then some of the other little spots they did. I also ended up having just a surgery on my left breast from some burn tissue, but they weren't able to do grafts in that spot. I guess grafting just doesn't work particularly well in that spot, or at least it didn't, for my case. So there I've got just, kind of a surgical incision there. And like I said, when I've got all my clothes on, it's just this one little spot on my arm that's visible, but my legs they're pretty rough.
Can you tell us about some of the daily treatments that you went through?
Yes.
Kind of things that you had to take on?
Yeah. So when they had me in the bandages, I don't know all of the, how long I was in some of these situations, but they just had me in bandages before the first surgery. Kind of let my body do a little bit of healing, or stabilizing, I guess. And then before the first skin graft surgery, and then they did I think they called it the cut down or something to that effect, where they went through and removed all of the bandages. And that was kind of my first experience with then going into the tub room. And the tub room is, where you go in. As far as I know, for most people, it's every day. And they drug you up real good and scrub you down to keep everything nice and clean and make sure, that you don't get infections if they can help it. That was, as the days had gone by and, I'm starting to feel more and more sensation, more pain. That was just a pain that I didn't even know existed. They have you on a pretty regular dosage of your pain medication. Before you go into the tub room, a few minutes before you go into the tub room, they kind of double up your pain meds, the oral pain meds. And then when I was in there, actually getting the scrubbing down done, they put you on IV medication. So there's nurses in the tub room with you and hook you up to IV pain meds. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think it might have been some kind of fentanyl cocktail at some points. And there were even a few times where that was not enough for the pain. And they had to also give me intravenous ketamine. And that ketamine that was a trip.
I would say this was the worst pain you ever experienced.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was, I didn't realize that you could, be in that much pain and still be alive. It was just so brutal being in that kind of pain. So,
I know as a burn survivor too, it's not just the burns that you fight. There's other things that come along, infections, sickness. Did you experience anything else like that as well?
Yeah, I ended up coming down with pneumonia a few weeks into my stay there at the hospital. That time in the hospital seems a little bit surreal. I just remember being in incredible pain and then always just either feel like I was just burning up or freezing cold. And no matter what happened, I just couldn't seem to get comfortable in that. And so they, took me for, I think CT and some other imaging just to check on my lungs. And they ended up finding a couple of other, incidental findings, they call them, in the hospital that thankfully turned out to be nothing. But that pneumonia, that was a scary one. I've never really been through something like that. I've got, I've had respiratory issues for a good part of my life, especially when I was younger. But that just kind of feeling like you're going to drown was not something I had ever experienced before.
So it's just not you having to recover from the burns in the hospital, but developing the pneumonia during COVID.
Yeah.
And experience that was something on top of it.
Yeah.
No weight to the
definitely
what was going on.
Yeah. That being during COVID, it was just a different time as far as how the hospital ran things. That they had very restricted visitation. So for most of the time that I was in the hospital, I was able to have one visitor per day. And so that was an interesting experience trying to coordinate, like who could come in, when they could come in, who's coming this day, that kind of thing. So I ended up leaning quite a bit on the nursing staff that was there. And even the cleaning folks that, that were in there, cleaning the room, or the CNAs or anybody like that. They were so sweet to me, and they were kind of my lifeline to the outside world.
Considering this happened during COVID, would you say that the isolation had an effect on you during the time?
Yeah, it got to be pretty lonely for certain, at times. And, I remember when people would visit me, there was a couple of times where the one person that could visit me that day, they would have done the tub room treatment a little bit later in the day, because you never really know when they're going to be able to do the treatment. So it's difficult to schedule around, and you never know if you're going to even be feeling up to see anybody. So there was a couple times where, my one person, I was knocked out for the time that they were coming to visit. So yeah, it got to be kind of lonely in there from time to time. And just when they finally did open it up, the hospital finally did open it up to where you could have 2 visitors a day, that even made a huge difference. Just, a bit more flexibility. And they were able to you know, I was able to have somebody come in, and even if it was not the best of time or anything like that, then, they could come back, or yeah, another person could come in at a different time of the day. But yeah, it was kind of lonely in there without being able to have visitors.
So I know from the beginning of your story, you had a lot of siblings. You guys have gone through a tragedy before. How did your siblings react to the accident?
They were pretty scared. One of my brothers in particular, when I was experiencing the really bad pneumonia, was he had come to the hospital and was kind of looking in the room, but they weren't letting anybody come into the room at that point. And he told me after the fact, he's like, I thought that was going to be the last time I saw you. And that piece of it, I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about that, but just, how scary that must have been for my family to think that they were probably going to be losing me. And just they would have to go through losing another sister. That still kind of messes with me even to this day, some, but thankfully that didn't end up being the case. So, yeah.
I can only imagine for your family, having to face that fear again from something that happened, to your sister before, and then now this happening with you in an accident. I want to ask you, during that time while you were there, how long did you end up staying in the hospital for?
I was in the hospital from, January 14th, and I went home on February 19th. So about 5 weeks, just shy of 5 weeks.
Now, because I know that your boyfriend was the one that helped you get into the shower, and, you said he saved your life.
Mm-hmm.
How did your boyfriend change after witnessing the accident?
He really had a hard time of things. He, as I had mentioned, he was impacted with layoffs from work and PTSD from what happened to me that night. And he just kind of went downhill, drinking more and more. And that he had a very rough time of that. I'm forever grateful that he did what he did for me, saved my life, and was also, able to be there with my dog to take care of my dog. But yeah, his mental health was really going downhill bad.
When did you realize that your trauma had also traumatized him?
He would sometimes call me at various, all hours when I was in the hospital. He'd be crying or really upset, or, I can't sleep. And I tried to get some resources for him to get some help. But, he wouldn't take advantage of anything. He just kind of stayed at my house and went downhill.
So I know you said that he had developed the PTSD from the accident. Can you walk us through the day that you got back home from the hospital?
Yeah. Well, when I finally got discharged from the hospital, they took out that feeding tube, which I had the feeding tube down my nose and throat the whole time I was there. And that was a miserable experience. It felt like my throat was on fire the whole time that I had that feeding tube in. And I wasn't able to get enough nutrition by eating alone. So they kept the feeding tube in, but we kind of, I was in this constant battle with the nutritionist there at the hospital. You need to get more calories and lots of protein, and you can't get that if you're not eating. And I said, well, I can't eat when my throat is on fire. So anyway, getting the feeding tube out the day I came home that was such a huge relief. And then he picked me up from the hospital, got home, saw my dog, and that was the best part of that day was just coming home and seeing my dog. He was a little bit like disoriented, like what is happening here, you know? So I came home, kind of got settled. And then I was resting for a little bit, took a nap, woke up, and then, you know, cause by this time I had been able to walk on my own with a walker. And so I decided I was going to take the dog for a short little walk around the neighborhood, cause I'm like, I gotta, you know, make sure I'm staying active and doing this for my healing. So I got dressed, got the dog, you know, situated, and we were walking around the little neighborhood there. And then I saw my boyfriend driving off in my car, and I just thought, I bet you he's going to the liquor store. And so he saw, you know, he was kind of coming out this way. I was walking this way, and I stopped, and, you know, he rolled down the window. I said, please don't go to the liquor store, you know, please don't. And I don't know if he heard me or not, but then he kind of indicated, you know, that he would be back shortly. I got home, got back inside, and then he came back a little while later, and he had definitely been drinking. He basically kind of passed out. I think at one point he was passed out on the floor and snoring really bad, like snoring to the point where, you know, I think that might have woken me up from a nap actually. And I, you know, went to shake him, and I couldn't wake him up, couldn't move him, nothing like that. I didn't really have a good way of getting in contact with anybody in his family. So I was trying to think of, you know, what can I do? I don't, you know, I'm not sure what's going on. And so I was just about to try to reach one of his brothers over Facebook, like Facebook Messenger or something like that. That's kind of the only thing I need to do. And he just right away, he stopped snoring. And I was, you know, it was like, wow, what has just happened, you know? So I went back over to him and was trying to wake him up, trying to rouse him, something, you know, he's a bigger guy. He's probably your size, Drew, you know, so there's no way that I would be able to move him, especially not in the condition that I was in.
Yeah, because it was your first day coming back.
It was my first day coming home.
You're on a walker and
yeah,
still trying to recover physically. And
Yep. Still, you know, covered in bandages and weak and in pain and everything like that. And then I couldn't hear him breathing at all. So I called 911, and they, you know, sent the paramedics over. And while I was waiting for the paramedics, they had me trying to do chest compressions on him. And they got there and worked on him for a few minutes. They moved him from my bedroom floor into the dining room, where they were able to work on him for a few minutes. And unfortunately, he didn't make it.